So when you first log into TouchStone, this is called the dashboard, and this is what is seen by everyone who has a username and password to TouchStone. So we're going to be talking about the functionality, mostly the control panel and management review on this screen. I'm also going to be talking about how, not only technically how you use these two tools, but some ideas on how to get the most out of them and how to structure them with your employees and with yourselves. So first thing I want to remind everyone of is over here in account administration, which you get to with the little wheel icon over here. You set control panels here in account administration. So if you're looking at your dashboard and there's nothing on it, there's no listing of positions under a control panel, then all that means is you haven't set the control panels yet. So you need to come here to account administration, choose the position that you want to give or the person you want to give the control panel to, go over here to the control panel button, and then choose the position on the org chart that this person fills and that you want what position you want to give them a control panel for. You want to do that for every user on your user list. And then when they log into TouchStone and go to their dashboard, they're going to see the control panel with the correct position that they fill. So the positions for the control panels, or the titles for the control panels, are derived from your organization chart. So your organization chart needs to be completed, obviously, before you can go and start setting control panels. So when you're in account administration here, when you're choosing the control panel, you're literally going to be seeing this organization chart, and you're just going to pick the position that person should have a control panel for. If you give a person a control panel for a managerial position, like this one, they're then going to see management review for the positions underneath them, right here, all these three. So since I have a control panel for the manager of admin and finance, under here in this management area, I see these three positions, which are underneath me on the organization chart. And because these three people, Mike, Bill, and Bob, have been given control panels for the bookkeeper, the IT position, and the receptionist, I'm seeing their names here under management review. So this is another common confusion that happens with setting the control panels. If you give yourself a managerial control panel and then you don't see anybody's names here in management review, it's because you haven't assigned these users or these people control panels yet, because there's nothing to see here unless they've been assigned control panels. So then I would see their name. So to access a control panel, first of all, it has to be assigned, so it has to appear, and then you select it. When you select it, it takes you to a list of the processes that this position is accountable for, this person. So all of these processes here are derived from the job description for this position. So back over here to the organization chart, this position right here, there's been, when I select it, it's going to show me the processes that have been linked to it. So all of these processes are on the for functions list in one place or another, and they've been linked to this position. So this is how TouchStone knows what processes to put in the control panel. Whatever processes are on this job description are the same ones that are going to appear on the control panel. If I want to take if I take a process off this job description, it's going to remove it from the control panel. If I put a process on this job description, it's going to add it to the control panel. So they're mirrors of each other. So let's go back here. First thing to do in the control panel is to create groups and organize the processes into some categories. So on the job description, it's just strategic and tactical. But here we have a lot more flexibility, and the processes can be moved into more succinct work groups. So you'll see right here, I've got one called management work. And then I've taken all the processes on the job description that are related to management work, and I've organized them into this section. Then I have one called finance. So I put the finance processes there. I have one called Human Resources, and then I put the human resource processes there. So the work groups, or the groups inside the control panel, they can be by subject area. They can also be by timing, like you could do things at the first of the month, things at the end of the month. So to create a group, you just select this Create Group button, and you put in the name of the group. And this is completely flexible. It's what you want to name it. And then I hit Save. Now this group is added down here to the bottom. Each control panel, each specific username and password, each person gets to customize their own groups and their own control panels. So even if you have like 4 salespeople, they all have access to the same processes, but they can organize their processes differently if they choose. So it's unique for that user. When you've added a group, the groups can be moved around or reordered. I'm just dragging this up to the top here and dropping it. Now it's right here. So all of this is drag and drop on the screen. I'm just pulling it up and making it at the top. Then the processes themselves are drag and dropped too. So I just drag this one and I'm moving it inside of this group. I can also reorder processes within a group. So I can reorder these just by dragging and dropping. If you want to edit the name of a group or group title, you just choose Edit, and then you select the group that group name that you want to edit, and then you put in the new name and hit Save, and then it just changes the title of that group. You can also delete a group. So if I hit Delete here, and then I go to the group I want to delete, I choose this new one, and I hit Delete, then that group's going to be gone. But you see what happened to this process? This process isn't gone. It just put it back on the default list. So the default list is what where the processes are, or what group they're in, until you start to organize them. When you start to organize them, you'll move all the processes off of the default list and into groups, and then ultimately the default list will go away. So I just refreshed my screen, and then that default disappeared. But if I was to add a new process to the job description, and then it would appear in here on the default list, or I was to delete a group, then all these processes, if I deleted this group, would go back to the default list. You can also go over to the left here and expand or collapse the process list, so you just see the groups. And then I can go here and click this, and it shows me the processes that are in it. If I click it again, it just collapses it. Everything inside of the dashboard in the control panel and management review is all mobile compliant. So sometimes when I'm working on my phone, I'll just collapse the groups if I'm looking at a lot of different processes, and then I can go right to the one that I want to find a little easier rather than scrolling down the screen. It's just a feature. I have this group here I just wanted to point out. It's called On Demand. So this is a group for processes that I don't use all the time. It's just stuff that I need to get to. I need to access it when I need to access it. It could be once a year. It could be once a month. It could be never. It's just a place where if I need to find information like this, then I would go to this. I would know it's in this on-demand group. And I usually suggest these be at the bottom of the list. So if you're dragging them like this, just take the on-demand processes and put them at the bottom, just so they're kind of out of the way of the stuff that's used all the time. All right, so that's creating groups. It's much nicer in the control panel when you've organized the processes. It's not so overwhelming. It makes it easier for people to find things. It makes it more logical. It makes it so they can zero in on something that they have to use. It takes all the clutter of sometimes all of the processes and puts them into more of the priority-driven view. Sometimes when employees look at their control panel, it's just this massive list of processes. They just get overwhelmed by it. And then we start to hear things like, it's too confusing, it's too hard, I can't learn it. So to minimize that, have things with familiar language, these group titles, have them put into priorities. I'm going to uncollapse this. The color coding in TouchStone transfers over to the control panels as well. So this right here is black, and so that means it's done. Somebody's marked it as complete. It's ready to use. This one's blue because technically it hasn't been marked as complete. And then if there was a process in your control panel that's red, meaning there's nothing in it yet, that would appear in red. So another technique in the control panel is when you have a bunch of red processes, it's still good for the employees to know that they have to do that work, even though it's not documented. But you could take those red processes and drag them down to the bottom and put them in a group that's called not documented yet or do not use, and then put all those processes down there. And then as you continue to document, or you document something and you want to implement it, then you can mark it black and then move it up into the category it belongs into in the group. So let's go to a process. I'm going to choose this one, key performance indicators. So when you select a process in the control panel, it takes you to the tools, all the details inside that process. So this process has got a work plan in it, it's got a checklist in it, it's got a document, and it's got a couple custom forms. It doesn't have any uploaded files in it. It doesn't have a policy note. It doesn't have a video. So all the tools that aren't used don't show up here. So on the process tools page over here on the 4 functions, when you're documenting something, you have an option of using all the different templates or deciding which ones to use. When you have decided that and documented with them, and then somebody goes to a control panel to access the process and use it, they're only going to see what was used. They're not going to see all the tools. So a reason somebody would come to a process like this in TouchStone is to actually do the process. So we call this the implementation of the process, the using of the process. So I might look at this work plan right here to kind of remind myself of what to do if I need to. So if I do key strategic indicators or the financial key performance indicators once a month or once a quarter, I might forget, how to calculate the return on equity ratio or the current ratio. So I could come here to remind myself. That's what the work plan is for. It's all the details. I would have been trained in all of this, obviously, or hopefully, but sometimes people forget, especially if it's something they don't do all the time. It's easy to not remember every single step of every single thing in order to do it correctly. So they could come to the work plan and review it. Now I'm just going to go back on this breadcrumb trail to key performance indicators. So work plans inside the control panel, they're for reference. They're for just reminding yourself of what to do. A checklist, on the other hand, is something that is used. So when a person comes to a process in the control panel, they may or may not look at the work plan. It just depends on if they want to refresh their memory. But they would always go right to the work plan. So if I click this financial KPI checklist, and I'm going to do the key indicators for Q3 2018, then I would go and check off that I did these steps. So I'd fill out each item as I did it, and then I save it. When I save it, it's date and time stamping it right here. You can see the date and time stamp. And it's also making it so I can download this copy if I want to through this print button. So when you hit the print, it's going to open this it's a PDF. It's like a electronic PDF. So here I can download it to my computer if I want to, or I could just print it. This is kind of useful sometimes because occasionally if you have something completed in the control panel, there might be situations where you want to upload it to another system or you want to upload it somewhere else, just the completed copy of this. And so that's how you would accomplish that. I could put something in the notes field if I wanted to about what happened while I was doing this or anything important. Every time I add something new to this, I'd save it one more time, and then it's going to save whatever changes I made. Now, if we go back here to key performance indicators, and this is that checklist. If I look all the way over here to the right, this is where TouchStone is saving all of these checklists. So I can see back over time all the checklists that I did for all the key performance indicator checklists. And if I want to view one, I just select it, and then I see that checklist. You can also find completed things through the reports, which I'll show you towards the end. So I'm going to go back here to the key performance indicators. If there's a document in a process that needs to be filled out or completed in some way, that's this. Here's a document here. If I select it, then now I'm seeing this document, and it's the same idea as the checklist. I would save this as the date or whatever made sense to save it as. I could put in notes, and now these fields are all live. So I can put in the evaluation percentages, I can put the current, the progress, and fill all this information out. And then when I save it, it date and time stamps it and saves it back to TouchStone. Now you can put date fields in this type of form if you want to, but you also remember that anytime it's saved, it's going to show you the completed date. And then here again, if I go back and you look along to the right of this title of this tool, you'll see the completed folder, and that's where it's being saved. The custom form tool in the control panel, this is something that's used quite often. So these custom forms are actual forms that have been created, and they're electronic web forms. So if I click this one that says finance indicators, then I see the form. So this is a copy of this form. And if I go to the save as, I would again save it as the date in this example. Whatever you save these as is what you can search for. So remember that. This is, in this example, if I was somebody looking for these performance indicators, I would be thinking the quarter of the year they were created in. If this was a customer service form or a customer complaint form, I'd probably be thinking the customer's name is what I would search for. If this was an HR document, like a termination form or a new employee form, I'd probably be thinking of that employee's name, and that's what I'd want to save it as. So then these fields are all live. You go through and put, the profit. So I could be taking this from another document, minus whatever it is. So you're putting in all that information in this fillable field. Then you're answering the questions. Is it out of range? Yes or no? And then in the comments, put why. Net profit, you'd be filling in the amount. Did it meet goals? Yes or no? So you would create these types of forms with the information that you want when somebody, is supposed to be filling it out and giving you that information. And then when I save it, again, it date and time stamps it, and it saves this form. Now if we go back here, there's another one. Here's HR indicators. So I'm the manager of admin finance, and I've got these two key indicators that I need to be evaluating, the overall financial indicators and then also the HR indicators. So same thing, employee morale. Did we measure that this quarter? Hopefully it's not 50%. Good, fair, poor. So again, I'm just filling this out, employee turnover. So you can put in, for indicators, it's nice to have the exact number, but when managers are reviewing these, or you as the business owner, you're just looking for a range. You can always dig into the document, dig into the reports and see the exact minute detail of everything. But here you just want to get a sense. The owner of the company or the manager of this department just wants to get a sense of, are we on track or not? Are we within the 0 to 5%? So then I save it, same thing, date and timestamps. So the control panel is about completing of the tools. That's one of the big uses of it. There's also this ability to collapse and expand too. So if you have a process that has a lot of tools in it and you just want to be able to zero right in on the checklist or the form that needs to be completed, just collapse it, and then it has more of this neat and tidy look. And then you can click that particular tool and it opens up what's inside of it. It will also show you here to the right with these little indicators here, how many custom forms are in here, how many checklists are in here. So let's go to another example. Let's say I'm a manager and I need to write someone up. I need to give them a written warning. So I click this process, and here are documents for giving verbal, written, and discipline documentation form. So I would go to the written warning form. I go here and save this as the employee's name. And then these fields are all live. So I'd put in, here's where the name kind of becomes redundant. Conversation date. You put that information in. So I'm just filling out this form. What was the rule that was violated? What is there any change in the employee's performance or behavior that's expected? And then I save it. So for HR type things, managerial things, these control panel information starts to be really important because I can store all of this into the TouchStone system in the dashboard, and then I can have it for reference. So things related to managerial work, like these key processes here, become very usable and nice inside of the control panel for every manager. If I'm doing higher level finance things like cash flow planning or budgeting or collection calls or accounts receivable billing reports, right here in the control panel, I can go to like a budget creation process. And then here's my 2018 budget. So I can access it from here. So this is an uploaded file. And if I hit View File, it's going to launch this Excel file and show it to me. And so here's the budget for 2018. And then if I make any changes to this or I want to start working on the budget for 2020, I can do a file save as and call this 2019. And then I can go back to TouchStone and upload that new file. So I'd go View File to view it. If I want to replace add a new file to this, I just hit Upload Completed File. I go to the new file, hit Open, and then save it. I'll probably save this as 2019 budget. So even with uploaded files, you can access the master file or a file that you've been using, and then you can fill it out and then re-upload that file. So if we go back here to the budget creation process and we look in the budget over here in this completed folder, and we're now seeing the 2019 budget. I could do the same thing with like the break-even analysis or the ratio analysis. This is the template for how to do ratio analysis. And if I hit View File, it's going to launch that. I fill it out with this year's ratio analysis, and then I re-upload that file. You can do this with contracts as well. So something that's in a PDF, you can download that contract template, have the client fill it out. Then you can scan that PDF back into your computer and then re-upload that signed file right to the process called contracts. So again, even with uploaded files in this situation, these files are used. They're viewed, they're completed, they're used, and they could be loaded and reloaded. Let's go to another example. Here's some great HR stuff. For those of you who were here last week, I kind of highlighted these 4 new processes from the library. So here, like with the onboarding process, if I had a new employee that just started, I could go to, first of all, remind myself of the steps of onboarding. Then I could go to the checklist for onboarding for that particular employee. I can save this as their name. And then I go through and check off these steps as I do them for the new employee and then save them. So this is a version of this is now saved back to TouchStone under that employee's name. Then I could go down to any kind of policy or document that needed to be filled out for the onboarding, and then again save that back to TouchStone under that employee's name. Now, if I'm the manager of admin finance, I'm doing the onboarding, and the president of the company wonders to himself or herself, I wonder if the onboarding of that new employee's been done. All they need to do is go run a report or go to me in management review, and they'll be able to see that I've done the onboarding. Same is true with interviewing. So if you have managers or people who are interviewing new employees, they can go down to any of these questionnaires. They can be asking this question and then putting in the answers, how the employee said it. They can make notes. When I'm doing interviewing, I just have my iPad open and I just tell the employee, I'm going to be making some notes as you talk. And so I'll be right in TouchStone making notes as they're talking. I keep eye contact with them and I look up and down, but it's important to capture what they've said, because so it's not just my gut feeling about it. We're actually hearing what they said. So you can fill in all the answers to how they answer these questions and then save it. And then again, that information is saved back to TouchStone. So use the processes in the control panel for, number one, things that you need evidence that it's been done. Important information that you need to have a history of it. You need to track it, like key performance indicators. By doing this all in TouchStone in the dashboard, you're ensuring that people are following the process correctly. Oftentimes what happens when people have spreadsheets all over the place with different information in them, and then they're emailing them back and forth to their manager, to other people, everybody's got multiple copies of everything. And your email's already cluttered with so much stuff. Now you've got important key performance indicator information in your email that you may not have saved the last time, and so suddenly you can't even compare Q1 with Q3 because you don't even know where Q1 went. This keeps it all in one place inside of TouchStone. It makes it easy for managers to review what their employees are doing without them having to go and ask them for things all the time. Because if they're supposed to be doing the new employee search recruiting and they're supposed to have taken people through the new interview process, I could just go and run a report and see if she had done that or not without having to ask her. If I'm worried that an employee wasn't onboarded correctly, I wanted to double check it, I just run a report and see. If it's not there, then I go interrupt that person and say, hey, what's going on? All right, so that's the control panel. There are going to be situations where you'll have employees and it doesn't make any sense for them to be using the control panel and completing things. I'm sure I could always make a case for any employee to do that. But having said that, if it doesn't make sense for any employees that you have for whatever reason, that's totally fine. Don't have them going into the control panel and logging in and creating checklists and forms. But it's always important for training. Always important for training. So let's run through an example of that. So let's say that Mike right here just got hired. And even though he may not be doing any checklists and forms and things in his control panel related to his work, I still set him up as a user. So as his manager up here, I can see him down here. And I can track training. I can track initial job description, process training, and I can track ongoing training with him. I can also, because he's set up as a user and has a control panel, if I have to write him up for some reason, or if I have to terminate his position, or do any of my performance reviews, one-on-one meetings, any of my managerial work up here, I can refer to him here because he's set up as a user. So Mike has been set up inside of TouchStone, and I, as his manager, can see him down here in Management Review. If I select his name here from Management Review, I'm going to see all the processes in his control panel, all the processes on his job description, including the public processes, which are all listed down here. You'll notice in this control panel, I've kind of organized the groups a little differently. In finance positions, a lot of times it's driven by dates, times. So we've got first of the month things, 15th of the month, things for financial management. In some administrative positions I've seen where they've done times of the day, like from 8 to 10 in the morning, these are the things you do. From 10 to noon, these are the things you do. So get creative with the groups. A manager can go and create groups for their employees. So see here, these are all illuminated. I could go and adjust Mike's groups here, make them what I want them to be. And then when he logs in, he'll see the groups that I created. Now he can go and create his own too, but there is that flexibility where the manager could create the groups. So if Mike was brand new and he'd gone through his first new employee training where he had got his keys and his phone and all those kind of new employee things, and now the job description training starts. So training him in his work, not onboarding kind of stuff, but literally training him in his work. This is where the manager should go to plan that training and keep that training on track. So it's the manager's job to train the employee in the work that they do. I mean, I think that's a given. What happens in a lot of small businesses is the employees train each other. It's like, watch what this person does. So that expectation of managers, whether the manager is yourself or you have managers, it's your job to make sure that your employees are getting the work done that they need to get done, that they're thoroughly trained. You have no right to complain about any type of work anybody is doing unless you've thoroughly trained them. If they've been thoroughly trained with documentation and consistently, then you can complain about how they're doing it. So any employee who's been messing up, not getting good results, if they haven't been trained properly, the first onus falls upon the manager for not having clear, concise, planned out training. So management review helps with this. How it helps is I can see these 2, 4, 6 processes and the public processes, because these have to be trained also. At least they have to be something where you refer to them and say, this is what this is for. So I take these 6 processes and I decide, how am I going to train Mike? What's the most important process first? Temporarily, you could even create groups inside a management review and call this week 1. And then they wouldn't be structured like this forever, but we could make this right here at the top and say, okay, week 1, I'm going to train him in collections. Then I could go create group and call this week 2. And then I can say, okay, during week 2, we're going to train him in accounts receivable. So you could structure the whole management review area based on the weeks or even the months of training that needed to occur for this employee. Some positions are trained in a month, some take 6 months. So you have to be realistic about the amount of time it takes people to learn things. Once the training's over, then I can get rid of these groups, week 1, week 2, and go back to something like this, structuring it by subject area or by timing. But this is kind of nice because when Mike logs in, he's going to see it by, this is what I'm going to learn week 1, this is what I'm going to learn week 2. What it also is forcing you to do is think to yourself, how long is it going to take him to learn collections? So we have a detailed process for how to do collections. If I took him through that and he learned the work plans and he memorized the scripts and he learned all the steps of it and watched the videos, practiced it, watched someone else do it for a while, how long should it take him to learn this if he's competent? So then you say, okay, it's going to take 5 days, which is a week. Or it's going to take 3 days, or it's going to take 6 weeks. And then that helps you as a manager be realistic about what it costs for you to hire a position like this and what the training is going to cost. So if Mike was going to go about learning his processes, this is how he would do it. So let's log in as Mike. So I'm going to log out of I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to log out as my position and log in as Mike. So he would go to the bookkeeper. This is the position he's learning. And you can see the groups change because I changed them from week 1 to week 2. Because Mike is just the bookkeeper and this is all that he does, when he goes into his TouchStone account, he can go over here and look at the org chart if he wants to. He's just going to see his position. He could look at the 4 functions list if he wants to, but he's just going to be able to see no processes in here other than the ones that are on his job description. Mainly what he's doing is going here to the dashboard and going to his control panel. So here he's going to see all the processes that he's going to learn in his training. You would say, okay, week 1, start with collections. It's very clear to him. Here we are, week 1, here's collections. He'd select that process, and he'd start to study it. So he'd look at the work plans, collecting past due accounts receivable. How do I do this? He'd read it, go through each of the steps, get it, follow it, go back, look at the next tool. There's a checklist here he has to fill out every time he does it. The manager could be sitting there saying, yep, so every month I want you to go to this checklist, save it as the first day of the month, fill it out, and save it back to TouchStone. He'd go to scripts that were involved in the process, like this one, know how to, some kind of weird formatting thing going on with that, but how to do a greeting, telling the person the reason for your call, if they say yes, if they say no. So he's going to memorize this. It's going to come out in his own words when he's, actually saying it, but he's memorizing the content of what is in these scripts. Sample script for a collection call. So greeting, this is what you say, the back and forth of the whole conversation. So as he's going through these tools, he's memorizing them and studying them. He would put a note to you as a manager, read and studied. Then he could put in notes. I don't understand this. Or easy, I got it. So he can put any kind of notes in here to the manager about that and save it. So then he goes back, handled that script, I got it. He looks at the uploaded files. So here are the collection letters. He studies them, he reads through them, and he does the same thing. Read it and agree, saves it. So he's just making notes to the manager, what he thinks about these documents as he's going through them. He looks at the different collection emails, make sure he understands the sequence of them. So when do I send out email number 1? Well, the work plan showed him when and how. So he looks at the template. Okay, I get it. I understand that. So same thing. Read it or studied it, save it, and then he goes back. So the process is the training. He's training himself by reading the documentation, memorizing the scripts, studying the forms, studying the files, watching a video. So here's a video right here. So he watches this particular video on collections if it exists. There's an audio file with collection call sample. So it's a role play of somebody reading these scripts on a collection call. And so he can hear how it's supposed to sound. So he goes through and studies this process. As studying the process, you may then have him go through a real collection call. So he's marked all this as complete. He's read and studied it. So then you have him have TouchStone open. He picks up the phone call and he goes through and tries to collect some money. And then the manager kind of gives him suggestions and points to things he might be doing wrong. So as he goes through all of this, he's learning the process. When he's finished, he feels like he's finished with the collections process. Then another thing that can happen is there can be a test inside of it. So in the custom form tool, he can create a test. You can create a test that he fills out also. So once this collections process is done, now we're going to flip back to the manager. And let's go back. So this is back to the manager area. Now here, I'm just going to refresh the screen. I can go to the collection process as the manager, and I can run a report doing this, which I'll show you. Or I can go here to this completed area, and I can see the work that he's done. So I can scan through it and see that he's completed. Also read any notes that he's made to me inside of this process. Then when I'm happy that he's trained, he's taken the test, he's got the information, I can go one process tool at a time if I want to, click this and mark him as trained, and then I can put in training notes right here. And then I save it. Then I go back, and you can see the little green check mark. So sometimes you'll train one process tool at a time if it's a longer training. If it's something simple where they're learning it all at one time, then you can go up and flip this box that says train all, and then check marks appear next to everything. If I go back, you'll also be able to see in management review the green check mark here. So this is back. I'm in management review now. Mike's gone through and studied all of this. I've given him the test. He's done examples. I'm satisfied he's trained, and I check him off with a green check mark. And then we go on to the next one. So this is literally a checklist for the manager on making sure that the employees are trained in everything. So this whole process for new employee training, where the employee logs in, they go through their processes step by step, they study, read them, then I as the manager go back, make sure that they've learned everything and mark them as trained. This is implementing processes. This is how you implement all of your processes. You want to make sure that your processes are implemented, and it basically means stepping the employees through them. Even if you have existing employees and they have been doing processes or doing their work for a long time, and you've implemented documented process in TouchStone and it's all new to everyone, treat it like new employee training. It just helps you to make sure with the employees that they understand that the documentation is there and that you want them to use it and follow it. So it would be the same kind of routine with a new employee. Say Mike has been with me for 6 years, but I've documented all of the bookkeeping processes, and now I really want to make sure that they work for him, that they are effective, and that they're being used, and that they're being updated when they need to be updated. So I would tell Mike, just like in the new employee situation, here, Mike, go through these processes. Make a note to me about what you think of them. Do they work? Is it consistent? Does it flow right? Have I missed anything? He can make notes to me inside of the processes for things he thinks could be better. But then ultimately, I would do the same routine with him right here. I'd check his name and I'd go and say, okay, he's read all the processes. He knows that they're there, and I'd mark him as complete. So it's a good exercise with existing employees as well when you're trying to implement something new. One of the biggest things that causes processes to fail and get outdated over time is that people just stop using them or they never use them. And the reason for that is nobody's given them, has taken them through an implementation process and said, this is important. We've had a lot of issues with not collecting our receivables, Mike. Here are some great new tools for how to do that. Let's work on it together. What more do you think could be added here? What more do you think we could do to get the collections to everything as less than 30 days? So you're working with him and for him with the documentation. So the main functionality here in management review, just kind of going back to the beginning, is the ability to be able to, number one, click on a process that's on one of your employees' job descriptions, see what they've completed in it by looking here in the completed folder if you want to, but also keeping training information, making sure that the green check marks are on every process, making sure you've put in notes for things that you think are important. If an employee is having an issue with a process, so suddenly the collections go from everything is current up to 30 days, that to 60 days, and you're thinking, well, Mike is not sending out the collection letters or is not making the phone calls because there's no notes that he made a phone call to any employee in here or any client in here, then you know you have a problem and he might need to be retrained. So you can even go to these train check marks and uncheck them and then put a note saying, you know, Mike really needs to work on this. Let's give it 2 weeks. So all of this is manual. It's you decide when the employee's trained and when they're not. So let's talk about the reports here before I let you go. So the reports tool allows you to run control panel reports, which means a report of the work that I've done here as the manager of marketing and sales. And it also lets you run management reports. So if you're a manager, then you see this section called management review. And rather than looking at everybody's individual control panels here, I can run comprehensive management reports. So if we choose control panel here, the things you can search are date range, so beginning date, end date. Text, this is the save as. So like we could say Q2 2018. So if I'm searching for anything that was saved with that title, then you see it all right here. So there's a checklist there, saved on this date and time. There's a document that was saved, and there's 3 custom forms. So this was what it was saved as, and this is what I'm searching for here. If you have multiple positions or control panels, sometimes people do, then you can search one or the other. If you don't choose a default, it searches all of them. And then you can search process tool type. So I could go here and just search for a checklist with this Q2 2018 in it. So the search range here just helps you kind of refine things and go exactly what you're looking for. Or you can choose ranges, things you did today or things you did yesterday. Under the management review reports, it's got this same search field, so date range, save as title, and user. So these are the employees inside of your management review. And so if you want to search for just one particular employee, and then you want to go and search a date range for that employee. What is the date today? We'll go 7 to 9, and then you hit run report. Then it's going to show you everything that Mike did within this date range. You could even refine it further from there by choosing the process tool type if you just want to search for checklists or as the save as. So this shows like a list of all of the things that I was searching for in that date range and that type. So I put this little example in here just to make a point for managers. This is something that Mike's completed here. It's a work plan, and it says, look at this. So this is an indicator that we use just internally where if there's a problem with a process, so Mike's following it, and he's like, wait a minute, this step is missing, or this needs to be innovated or changed. If you click at, have him save it as look at this, then you can see in the notes right here what he's put in. Detail for QB reporting needs to be added. So I, as the manager, can look at this and I can know, okay, there's an issue here. This process needs to be updated. So that's another thing to kind of make your employees mindful of as they're going through their processes. If there is things within the process that needs to be innovated and changed, then make a note to the manager about it. Bring it up in a meeting. There's something related to process innovation that you can do in your businesses that I think is very effective. And what it does is it gets all the employees involved in making sure that the processes are up to date. So what you can do is you can have a company meeting once a month if you're a small company, or probably more effectively is department meetings once a week or at least once a month. So the finance admin department meets once a week for an hour. Doesn't have to be a huge department meeting. 10 minutes of that hour-long meeting is spent for process innovation. So what the manager does is they say, okay, well, for the whole department, we are going to think and work on the collections process because everyone's kind of got a role in that. So for the week or for the month, whatever the timing is, the manager tells them the collections process is the process of the month. So I want everybody to pay particular attention to the documentation. Before the meeting next month, study that documentation. Think about it. Make notes inside of your control panels as you're going through, and you think of new and better ways to do the collections process. Everybody's got to go through all the documentation, glancing through it, and making sure that nothing has changed or nothing can be made better. So then in that department meeting, the first thing we do is we stop and we say, okay, let's talk about the collections process. Bring it up on the screen, right inside of TouchStone. Go to the collections process. How's the work plan look? Everybody's got to contribute something. They talk about it. This needs to change. That should change. This could be better. How's the checklist working? Is it still useful for everyone? Can we make it shorter? Can we change it in any way? How are the scripts working? Does anyone have any new ideas for how to get to the decision maker or how to get to them to commit to sending the money in a better way? How do you think the emails are looking? What are the responses you're getting? So it could be 10, 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of time. But what you're doing is by having this happen is you're reinforcing every process once a month. And you're innovating every process once a month. And you're making sure your employees understand that this isn't just documentation sitting out in the internet somewhere. This is real, important training, useful workflow, efficiency. It's everything, and that you view it as everything. So you're going to make it important to sit and talk about it. Another thing that happens by doing a process of doing a routine like that is all your processes are updated all the time, which is amazing. I heard a TouchStone user say a few weeks ago, well, we're going to make it so January of every year we're going to innovate all the processes. And I was like, wow, that is a good idea. Well, that it's good to innovate, but it's a very bad idea to wait until the end of the year to innovate. It's crazy because things change all the time. And if you know that something has changed and needs to be updated, but you're just like, we're going to wait till January, even though it's only June, it's not a good way to go about it because you're making the documentation into something that gets outdated quite quickly. And then you have this huge project every January of updating everything, which is sometimes similar to starting from the very beginning. It's also making it so employees are just ignoring what doesn't work. So they look at documentation and they know those steps have changed. They know it doesn't work anymore. And it's like, why look at it? Why even do the checklist? It doesn't make any sense anymore. So then they kind of push it aside. They stop using TouchStone until January. So have some form of innovation where the dashboard is the key for it. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, what they're responsible for. They're using this information to refer if they've forgotten how to do something. Training is always referred to inside of TouchStone. Innovation happens inside of TouchStone in the processes. Before I let you go, also remember that these public processes are inside of the control panel view. So if I go as I'm logged in as this manager of admin and finance, and I go to this employee handbook process, and then I go to the work rules here, and I say, read and agree. This is being saved inside of my control panel now. So it's date and time stamped at this day and time. So even though I accessed this from the public area, when I do anything inside of it, it's saved unique to me. So if we go back to Mike here, you'll see a clearer example of it. I, as his manager, I can see his public processes down here. So if I've asked him to go to the employee handbook and the work rules and list and make a note to me that he's read and agreed to this, or I ask him to go to the classes and workshops process and study one of the in-service workshops that we had last month because I think it would be helpful for him, and he goes to this and he completes something inside of it, I can now see it in management review, and I can also run a report and see it. So this concludes the end of this technical training series. The whole training is going to repeat in, I think, another few weeks. I'm not exactly sure. You'll be getting emails about that. You're always welcome to attend. The subjects and the themes are basically the same. So if it helps you to hear it again, then you're more than welcome to come at any point in time. Another thing I want to point out, too, is the TouchStone University trainings. Right over here, there's Support Plus. If you go to the TouchStone University trainings, these fluctuate every month, and they're shorter. They're about 30-minute sessions just on particular topics. So you'll see those listed if you're looking for more training. There's one on the 13th. That's the last one, and then the dates will be reset. So these change as well, these different topics. So this is a good resource or thing, events to attend. Also here inside of the Resource Center, all the updated technical trainings are here under webinars. So every time we do one, it's replaced the old one with the new one. So you can always go here and get a refresher on anything. Or after you've listened to a session, you're like, my managers really need to hear that, or I want my employees to learn how to document work plans better. You can go right to that training session and just have them watch this one. So these are always updated and current on our website or in the Resource Center. Another quick thing I want to point out, which often gets missed, is here in the video section, there's this tool, this video series called Process of the Week. So these are short little 10-minute videos on each library process. So if you've seen a library process that I've used, or you've pulled some over from the library and you're just wondering, how do I implement and use these? You can go to any one of these topic areas, and then you see, a list of that library process. So like here's strategic planning, here's the compensation plan, using job descriptions to manage employees. That's a good one. One-on-one meetings. So know that you can go here into the process of the week and learn more. TouchStone is a big project to get completed. And one of the funny things about it is it's never quite done because the innovation is always so important. So just some parting words about that. You have to spend a little bit of time over the long haul to get really effective processes built. So a little bit of time over the long haul. It's not going to happen overnight. All of you have full-time jobs. So this could be a full-time job. So focus on doing a little bit over the long haul, an hour a day, 3 hours a week. If you do an hour a day or even just 3 hours a week, in a few months, you're going to have quite a lot done. Don't wait to implement things. When you document one thing, even if it's something from the library, implement it. Sit down with the people who are going to use it. Go through it in their control panel, just like you saw me do. It's just simply talking to them about it. Read the steps. If there's a checklist in it or anything that needs to be completed, make that a requirement right then and there. So implement as you go. Don't wait till you're all done and then try to implement everything. The sooner you get people used to coming to TouchStone to find what they need related to their work processes, the sooner you do that, the more effective it's going to start to work for you. When employees say, hey, where's this and how do I do this? Don't answer them if you know it's in TouchStone. Tell them to go to TouchStone and find it. You're only going to have to do that a few times before they realize that you're not going to jump around being the answer person anymore. That information is in TouchStone, and if it's not in TouchStone, then it needs to be put in TouchStone. And it's worth the 10 minutes to have them sit and do that, because then the next time someone else asks you about it, well, you know it's there. There's always going to be work activities that are on demand or random or variable that you're going to have to deal with, and there won't be a process for it because it doesn't make sense. But for the things that are rudimentary, that 80% of what we all do, and it's a lot, have that information be in TouchStone and make your employees own it. Make them go there to find it and use it, because that makes them more independent and more efficient in the long run. So thanks for coming, everybody. Another quick plug, if you need us to help you in any way, training of any kind, just to review what you're doing in your TouchStone account, look at your 4 functions, look at a process, just go to the Resource Center, go to the Contact Us, and send a message saying, have someone call me, I need some help. Training's always free. We'll get on the phone with you, we'll review things for you, we'll give you feedback. So lean on us for support when you need it.